Lauren Walker's first day as the regional director should have been a celebration of her hard work, but instead she was met with blatant disrespect from a manager who dismissed her capabilities. What happens when the truth about her position comes out? Will justice be served, or will prejudice prevail? Stay tuned for this powerful story and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more unforgettable tales. Lauren Walker adjusted her blazer in the elevator mirror. The soft hum of the rising lift couldn't drown out the voices in her head. They weren't her own. They were echoes of every doubter she'd encountered on her way up the corporate ladder. Managers who underestimated her, colleagues who dismissed her, and mentors who gave advice that felt more like warning. "You'll have to work twice as hard," her mother used to say, her voice firm but loving. Today, Lauren stood as living proof that hard work did pay off. She was walking into her first day as the new regional director of a company that had once felt like an unattainable dream. But she wasn't naive. She knew this victory wasn't going to be without challenges. The elevator doors opened to the executive floor. Her heels clicked against the polished tiles as she stepped into the sleek reception area. Lauren couldn't help but notice how her presence caused the receptionist's eyes to widen slightly. Whether it was surprise, curiosity, or something less innocent, she couldn't be sure. She smiled politely and introduced herself. "Good morning, I'm Lauren Walker. I'm here for my onboarding as regional director." The receptionist nodded quickly, scrambling to check her calendar. "Of course, Ms. Walker. Please take a seat. I'll let Mr. Simmons know you're here." Lauren took a deep breath, settling into one of the modern yet uncomfortable chairs. She'd been here before. Not in this office, but in these situations. The polite stares, the surprise when she walked into rooms where she supposedly didn't belong. She knew the routine. Her credentials were flawless, but her mere existence seemed to catch people off guard. She had long stopped letting it bother her, at least outwardly. Bradley Simmons leaned back in his ergonomic chair, absent-mindedly scrolling through his phone. He was skimming over the resume he'd just been emailed. It belonged to some new hire he was apparently supposed to help on board today. The name stood out to him immediately. Lauren Walker. He frowned. The name sounded like the kind of diversity hire the company had been making lately to keep up appearances. With a sigh, he opened the attachment. His eyes flicked over the list of degrees and accomplishments. Ivy League education, multiple promotions, award-winning project management. Impressive, sure. But something about it didn't sit right with him. "Lauren Walker," he muttered under his breath, the skepticism dripping from his tone. "Bet she padded half of this stuff." He pushed away from his desk and made his way to the reception area. As he rounded the corner, he spotted her, his brows furrowed ever so slightly. Lauren was poised, sitting straight-backed with her phone in hand. Her tailored navy suit and natural curls framed a face that exuded confidence. Something about her struck him as too polished, too ready. He approached with a practiced smile that barely masked his condescension. "Miss Walker, is it?" he asked, extending a hand. "I'm Bradley Simmons, Senior Hiring Manager. I'll be walking you through your orientation today." Lauren rose and shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Simmons. I appreciate you making the time." Bradley chuckled lightly. "Well, it's not every day we bring in a new regional director. Quite the jump, huh? So, where you coming from again?" "Hudson Tech," Lauren replied evenly. "I was the senior operations manager there for 5 years. Bradley raised his eyebrows as though impressed, but couldn't resist an offhand comment. "Hudson Tech? Big name. They must have been sad to see you go." His smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Did you manage to leave them anything on your way out?" Lauren's smile tightened, but her voice remained calm. "Actually, I left them a fully optimized operations system that increased their annual revenue by 20%. They're in good hands." Bradley nodded, the smugness in his demeanor fading slightly. He gestured toward the hallway. "Shall we? I'll show you around before you settle in." As Bradley led Lauren through the maze of glass-walled offices, he couldn't help but keep up his running commentary. "This department handles client accounts. Great team. though we've had some issues with deadlines. Maybe you can sprinkle some of that Hudson Tech magic here, he said with a chuckle. Of course, it's all about understanding the culture. Corporate life can be tricky. Lauren nodded politely. I'm familiar with corporate dynamics, Mr. Simmons. He smirked. Oh, I'm sure you are. But every company's different. You'll find we have a pretty high standard for leadership here. The subtle digs weren't lost on Lauren, but she kept her composure. She knew men like Bradley, men who equated their proximity to power with superiority. They thrived on the idea that their approval was necessary for success. It was a narrative Lauren had never bought into. Bradley stopped in front of an empty office and gestured grandly. Here we are, your new domain. Hope you like it. Lauren stepped inside. The office was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city skyline. A sleek desk sat in the center, and a small table with chairs occupied the corner. She turned to Bradley. It's perfect, thank you. Bradley shrugged. Well, let's hope it stays that way. This is a fast-paced environment. Sink or swim, you know. Lauren smiled. I'm a strong swimmer. Bradley's laugh was hollow. Well, I guess we'll see. By the afternoon, Lauren was seated in a team meeting, observing the staff she would soon be managing. Bradley was seated across from her, dominating the conversation. He spoke in grandiose terms, but it quickly became clear that he was more interested in hearing his own voice than fostering discussion. When Lauren attempted to contribute, he cut her off with a dismissive wave. We'll get to that later, he said curtly. She let it slide for now. This wasn't the time for confrontation, but as the meeting progressed, she made mental notes. It was clear that Bradley was used to being the center of attention. She wondered how he'd react when that changed. As the meeting wrapped up, Bradley leaned back in his chair and stretched. Well, that's it for today. Ms. Walker, I hope you found this enlightening. Of course, it'll take some time to get up to speed. If you need help figuring out what we do here, just let me. Lauren met his gaze evenly. Thank you, Mr. Simmons. I think I'll manage just fine. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance, perhaps? But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. As she returned to her office, Lauren sat down and took a deep breath. The day had been challenging, but not unexpected. She knew she was walking into a space where she'd have to prove herself, even when she'd already done so 100 times before. What Bradley didn't know was that she'd faced far worse, and she always came out on top. Lauren glanced at her laptop and opened her calendar. Tomorrow would bring another round of challenges, but she was ready for it. The question was Bradley? Lauren arrived at the office early the next day, her resolve as unshakable as ever. The morning sun barely peeked through the city skyline as she stepped into her office and powered on her laptop. A long day awaited her, filled with meetings, evaluations, and a deep dive into the operational challenges she was expected to address. But none of that fazed her. She had weathered storms before, and she would do so again. The first hurdle of the day came sooner than expected. Bradley Simmons strolled into her office without knocking, his signature smug grin firmly in place. He was holding a thick stack of papers. "Morning, Miss Walker," he said, his tone overly cheerful. "I figured I'd bring you the operational reports from the past quarter. They might be a bit dense for someone new, so feel free to ask if you need me to walk you through them." Lauren met his gaze, unflinching. "Thank you, Mr. Simmons. I'll review these today." Bradley placed the papers on her desk and leaned against the doorframe. "Just a heads up. Some of these reports can be a bit technical. You know how it is, lots of jargon and financial projections. But I'm here if you need any guidance." Lauren smiled politely. "I'm well versed in financial analysis, but I appreciate the offer. I'll let you know if I have questions." Bradley chuckled lightly, clearly unimpressed by her composed response. "Of course, take your time. No rush." As he left, Lauren's eyes fell on the stack of papers. She recognized the tactic immediately, overwhelm the new hire with excessive documentation, and hope they flounder. It was a classic power move, one she had encountered before. She picked up the first report and began reading. If Bradley thought she'd struggle, He was about to be sorely disappointed. By midday, Lauren was immersed in her work when her calendar pinged with a reminder. A key client meeting was scheduled in 10 minutes. Bradley had conveniently forgotten to mention it during their interactions. She grabbed a tablet and headed to the conference. The room was abuzz with conversation as employees prepared their notes and presentations. Bradley was already there, positioned at the head of the table. He gave Lauren a brief, dismissive nod as she entered. Mr. Walker, he said, glad you could join us. I assume you've had time to review the client's history? Lauren remained calm. Of course. I've familiarized myself with their portfolio and the key issues we need to address today. Bradley raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The meeting began, with Bradley taking the lead. His presentation was flashy but lacked substance. He focused heavily on surface-level metrics, avoiding the more pressing challenges the client faced. Lauren listened intently, occasionally glancing at the reactions of the other team members. It was clear they were unimpressed. When Bradley finished, he turned to Lauren with a condescending smile. Anything you'd like to add, Ms. Walker? Lauren nodded. Thank you, Mr. Simmons. I do have a few points to address. She stood, connecting her tablet to the room's display screen. Within moments, a detailed analysis of the client's pain points and proposed solutions appeared on the screen. Lauren spoke confidently, breaking down each issue with precision and outlining a clear strategy for improvement. Her ideas were innovative, actionable, and supported by data. As she spoke, the room grew quiet. Even Bradley seemed momentarily stunned. When she finished, the client representative clapped lightly. That's exactly the kind of approach we've been hoping for, he said. It's refreshing to see such a well-thought-out plan. Lauren thanked him, her expression calm but inwardly triumphant. She sat down, and for the rest of the meeting, Bradley barely spoke. His usual bravado was nowhere to be found. Later that afternoon, Lauren returned to her office to find an email from the CEO's assistant. The executive team wanted her to present a full operational analysis at the quarterly review meeting tomorrow. It was a high-stakes opportunity, one that could cement her authority or provide her detractors, like Bradley, with ammunition. Lauren worked late into the evening, meticulously preparing her presentation. She reviewed every report, charted key performance indicators, and identified opportunities for growth. By the time she left the office, the city lights were twinkling against the night sky. She was ready. The next day, the quarterly review meeting began promptly at 10 a.m. The conference room was filled with high-ranking executives, including the CEO, whose sharp eyes scanned the room as everyone settled in. Bradley was seated a few chairs down from Lauren, his usual smirk in place. The meeting began with routine updates from department heads. Then the CEO turned to Lauren. Ms. Walker, I believe you have some insights to share regarding our operations. Lauren stood, her heart steady. Thank you, Mr. Colton. I'm honored to present my analysis. She connected her laptop to the display and began her presentation. The room fell silent as she spoke, her voice confident and clear. She highlighted inefficiencies, proposed cost-saving measures, and outlined a roadmap for sustainable growth. Every point was backed by data, and her recommendations were both bold and practical. As she wrapped up, she noticed Bradley shifting uncomfortably in his seat. She could feel the weight of his envy, the realization that her expertise was undeniable. The CEO leaned back in his chair, nodding thoughtfully. This is exceptional work, Miss Walker, he said. Your analysis is thorough, and your recommendations are exactly what we need to stay ahead. I'm looking forward to seeing these strategies implemented. The room erupted in applause. Bradley clapped along, but his expression was tight. The CEO's praise left no room for doubt. Lauren's position as regional director was well earned. After the meeting, Bradley approached Lauren in the hallway. His usual confidence was replaced by a forced casualness. Impressive presentation, he said. I didn't realize you'd put so much effort into it. Lauren smiled politely. Thank you, Mr. Simmons. I believe preparation is key. Bradley hesitated, as if weighing his next words. "You know, if you ever need help navigating the company culture, I'm here to assist." Lauren's smile didn't waver. "I appreciate the offer, but I think I'm managing just fine." As Bradley walked away, Lauren felt a sense of satisfaction. She hadn't just proven herself, she had set a standard. And Bradley, for all his attempts to undermine her, was beginning to realize that his tactics would no longer work. By the end of the day, Lauren's success had reverberated throughout the office. Team members stopped by her office to congratulate her, expressing their excitement about her leadership. For the first time, she felt the beginnings of a supportive network forming around her. But Lauren knew her journey wasn't over. Bradley might have been humbled for now, but systemic biases didn't disappear overnight. She was ready to face the challenges ahead, knowing that her strength and determination would continue to pave the way for change. Lauren closed her office door and sat back in her chair. She had claimed her space, not just as a leader but as a force for progress. And she wasn't going anywhere. The office buzzed with energy the morning after the quarterly review. Lauren's presentation had been the talk of the company, and word of her exceptional performance had traveled quickly. Employees who had previously kept their distance now stopped by her office to offer congratulations or seek advice. Lauren accepted their praise with grace, but she was focused on the future. The real work was just beginning. Meanwhile, Bradley Simmons had been noticeably subdued. The smirk that usually adorned his face was absent, replaced by a forced politeness whenever their paths crossed. His ego had taken a blow, but Lauren knew better than to assume he was entirely humbled. Men like Bradley didn't change overnight. As the week progressed, Lauren implemented the first phase of her operational strategy. She scheduled team workshops to foster collaboration and addressed inefficiencies she had identified in her analysis. One of her initiatives involved creating mentorship programs to empower underrepresented employees and ensure their voices were heard in decision-making processes. It was a small step toward dismantling the barriers she had faced throughout her own career. During one such workshop, Lauren noticed Bradley sitting in the back of the room, arms crossed and expression skeptical. He hadn't contributed much, preferring to observe rather than engage. But as the discussion unfolded, even he couldn't deny the enthusiasm and innovation that Lauren's approach inspired. Team members who had previously seemed disengaged now shared ideas and proposed solutions with a sense of ownership and pride. Later that day, Lauren was called to the CEO's office for a follow-up meeting. Mr. Colton greeted her warmly as she entered. "Lauren, I wanted to personally commend you for the impact you've made in such a short time. Your leadership is exactly what this company needed." "Thank you, Mr. Colton," Lauren replied. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to contribute." He leaned forward, his tone growing serious. "That's not all. I've also received some concerning feedback about workplace dynamics, specifically regarding Bradley Simmons. It seems his behavior toward you and others has been less than professional." Lauren hesitated for a moment before responding. "Bradley has certainly been challenging, but I've chosen to focus on the bigger picture." Mr. Colton nodded. "Your professionalism is admirable, but it's important to address these issues head-on. I'll be having a conversation with him about his role here and our expectations moving forward." Lauren appreciated the support, though she couldn't help but wonder if the intervention would truly change Bradley's mindset. Nevertheless, she trusted her actions to speak louder than his words ever could. The following week, a company-wide meeting was announced to unveil new initiatives and celebrate recent successes. Lauren was scheduled to speak about her operational strategy, but to her surprise, Bradley was also on the agenda. She entered the conference room to find him standing near the podium, shuffling his notes nervously. When it was Bradley's turn to speak, he addressed the room with an uncharacteristic humility. "I'd like to start by acknowledging that I've made mistakes in the way I've approached my role," he began, his eyes scanning the room. "I've learned a lot over the past few weeks, especially from watching how Ms. Walker has led with integrity and vision. I'm committed to improving and contributing to this team in a more meaningful way." The admission caught everyone off guard, including Lauren. While she remained skeptical of his sincerity, she chose to accept his words at face value. For now. When Lauren took the stage, she spoke with the confidence and clarity that had become her trademark. She outlined the progress the company had made under her leadership and shared her vision for the future. Her closing remarks were met with a standing ovation, a testament to the respect she had earned. As the meeting ended, Lauren lingered in the conference room, gathering her materials. Bradley approached her cautiously, his hands shoved in his pockets. "I wanted to say thank you," he said, "for not letting my behavior derail your efforts." Lauren looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I didn't do it for you, Bradley. I did it for the team. And for myself." He nodded, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Fair enough, but for what it's worth, I've learned a lot from you. I hope I can put it to good use." Lauren studied him for a moment before responding. "Actions speak louder than words. Let's see what you do next." Over the next few months, Lauren's influence continued to transform the company. She established diversity and inclusion initiatives, revamped outdated policies, and fostered a culture of collaboration and respect. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Employees across the organization began to thrive under her leadership. One afternoon, Lauren received a visit from a young intern named Kayla. The intern's nervous energy reminded Lauren of herself at the start of her career. "Ms. Walker, I just wanted to say how inspiring it is to see someone like you in this position," Kayla said, her voice trembling slightly. "It makes me feel like I belong here." Lauren smiled warmly. "Thank you, Kayla. You do belong here. Never let anyone make you feel otherwise." The moment resonated deeply with Lauren. It reminded her why she had fought so hard to succeed, not just for herself, but for the countless others who would follow in her footsteps. As the weeks turned into months, Bradley began to show signs of genuine change. He participated in mentorship programs and even collaborated with Lauren on a major project. While he still had a long way to go, his efforts suggested that he was beginning to understand the value of humility and inclusion. One evening, as Lauren packed up her office for the day, she reflected on her journey. The challenges she had faced were daunting, but they had shaped her into the leader she was today. She knew the fight against systemic biases was far from over, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Every step she took paved the way for a more equitable future. Lauren glanced at the framed photo on her desk, a picture of her and her mother taken years ago. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "You'll have to work twice as hard, but you'll get there." With a smile, Lauren turned off the lights and stepped out of her office. She wasn't just surviving in a world that had often underestimated her, she was thriving. And she was just getting started. Lauren's journey had proven one thing beyond doubt. Resilience and excellence would always outshine prejudice. And while the battle wasn't over, she was ready for whatever came next.